What's going on, everybody? It's Mr. Do It On. In this video, we're going to be talking about the Arizona Cardinals finally finishing up the NFC West here, our fourth and final team. Now, in our last video, we talked about the Seattle Seahawks, a team that I think is going to win the NFC West here. And Arizona should be a team that battles with them, possibly for the top spot, maybe even a wild card spot, but we'll see what happens. Last year, they finished 7-8-1. Carson Palmer had a pretty okay year, but he's getting up there in age. Their offensive line situation is not very well, and they didn't address it really in the draft either. It's more a problem of the offensive tackles. As great a year as David Johnson did have last year, he only averaged 4.2 yards per carry last season, which is not very good, even though he put up over 2,000 total yards in the season. He had 80 catches. He was probably the MVP of the league, should have been the MVP of the league in my opinion. I mean, he had over 2,000 yards and 20 touchdowns in a season for a running back. It's quite impressive, especially the way that running backs are devalued in today's game. But jumping to the Cardinals and seeing some key additions that they had this offseason, doesn't look like anybody too crazy. Tony Bergstorm, Jarvis Jones played defensive end outside linebacker in there, 3-4. Carlos Dansby, who's been with Arizona before. Antoine Bethea and Phil Dawson. Some of their losses include Calais Campbell, probably one of the best 3-4 ends over the last 8 years or so. Kevin Minter, Tony Jefferson, who had a great season last season, and Jerron Brown. Not too many big losses, but they also had a pretty solid draft in my opinion, with Hassan Reddick and Budda Baker going as their first 2 picks last year. Hassan Reddick, I believe, is transferring to inside linebacker. In college, he played as a 4-3 end, so this will be an interesting 4-3 end, I believe, or a 3-4 rush guy. This will be interesting. And Budda Baker, safety out of Washington, had a great season last year for Washington, a team that won the Pac-12. It'll be interesting to see where he fits in at safety with the addition of Bethea, having Tyrann Mathieu. It'll be interesting to see what they do. I can see him starting day one. Transitioning into the Cardinals defense, it's a very solid defense with a lockdown corner, Patrick Peterson. Tyrann Mathieu coming along after having a couple injuries the last couple seasons. Chandler Jones as a rusher. Overall, these guys are pretty solid, but like I said, they did lose Calais Campbell, a guy who was probably one of the toughest, strongest guys on their defensive line. We'll see what happens. The team might miss Tony Jefferson, a guy who was signed by, I believe, the Ravens this past offseason. Overall, this team has a couple needs, probably on the defensive front and definitely the offensive front. Larry Fitzgerald is getting up there in years as well. I mean, they drafted Malcolm Floyd a couple years ago, and he turned out to be a very pedestrian player. But they're going to need to start looking at the youth movement, looking to eventually find Carson Palmer's replacement. And it'll be interesting to see where they go with there, probably in next year's draft, obviously, depending on how he feels after this year and where they finish this year. I know Bruce Arians has contemplated retirement as well. So this team is up there in age on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, they're a great defense. They're a top 10 defense. Now, jumping into this team's schedule, let's see what they got. Start the season off at Detroit. That should be a W. At Indianapolis, who doesn't look like they're going to have Andrew Luck, so that's a W. Versus Dallas on Monday night. That's in Arizona. That is a toss-up game. Possibility that Zeke might be out. They have a great defense versus a great offense. We'll see. Versus San Francisco, that should be a W. At Philadelphia, going from West Coast to East Coast, that time difference always fucks the team up. So I'm going to leave that one as a toss-up. Versus Tampa Bay, that should be a W. At the Rams, that should be a W. I do still think that the Rams, for some reason, know how to play these teams, so maybe it'll be a split season series. Then they get their bye week and San Francisco. That should be a W. Then they finally face Seattle on a Thursday night game in Arizona. I'm going to give that one to Arizona. It'll be a toss-up, though, but maybe it'll probably go to Arizona based upon home field advantage. Then they go to Houston. I don't know how Houston's going to look on the offense side of the ball, but their defense is solid. Toss-up game. Versus Jacksonville, W. Versus the Rams, like I said, split season series. Versus Tennessee. Tennessee is an improved team. I don't know if their defense is ready to compete like that. but on the offensive side of the ball, they're going to ground and pound you. I'm going to look at that one as a toss-up as well. At Washington, in Washington in December, toss-up game versus the Giants, toss-up game at Seattle, toss-up game. Now, looking at this schedule, it was a lot tougher than I thought it was going to be, actually. Having to play the NFC East and the AFC South. The AFC South is a bad division, and their place games are, it looks like Detroit and Tampa Bay. Those two teams are not easy victories anyway. Like I said, I can see them competing with Seattle in the division, but looking at the schedule now, it makes me contemplate if I was even close to that prediction. I think that their ceiling is 10-6, and their floor might be 8-8. This is a team that is, like I've said, older on the offensive side of the ball, and their defense is very solid. Their defense will keep them in games. So, like I said, 10-6 to 8-8, anywhere around there. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. This is wrapping it up. We're about to finally jump into the AFC. I can't wait. We're going to start off in the AFC East. Yeah, that's going to be fun. That's a very bad division that the Patriots have been running for the last 15 years. Make sure to go ahead and check out my other videos. I'm out. Thanks for watching. Peace.